So if you guys haven't already seen, I released my tier list for the E3 endgame towards the end of last week. And it's interesting because I've had a lot of responses because of it, and I thought I'd make a follow-up video where I'd discuss why I've made the choices I have and why each hero is in the position that it is. Now, I'm going to be focusing on PvP today, and if you want to look at the PvE tier list, I'll be doing a follow-up video on that later, which you should probably be able to find on my channel in the next few days. So guys, here it goes. Let's take a look at the PvP tier list for the E3 endgame of March 2019. Kicking off the list at tier 0, we have Ada, and for most people this doesn't come as a surprise at all. She is easily the best hero in the game, and you can build her in two kinds of ways. If you don't have her at E3, you can give her an attack stone and give her a damage reduction artifact, and she should do quite well. If you do have her at E3, the way people love to build her at the moment is with a speed HP stone and some sort of energy artifact, preferably Demon Bell, to maximise that damage, and so her active skill can go off straight on round 1, because her active skill does damage to opponents every time they use their active skills, so it's best to get it off as early as you can. In tier 1 we find Aspen, which should come as no surprise. Fantastic burst hero. He does additional damage when you drop opponents below 35% health. Just a great way of dealing some great damage. Mim, again, he's a fantastic hero too. People like to run him in multiple copies in good versus evil teams, and that's the dominant team at the moment, really, the double Mim good versus evil team. So that's why he finds himself at tier 1. Fantastic at enabling those kind of decay team methods where when your heroes die, your opponent's heroes die. It's going to add towards Mim's overwhelming and stockpiling decay damage that he does with his final passive. Valkyrie should come as no surprise in tier 1 either. Incredibly amazing hero. Her attack scales with her health. Really interesting build. When she gets CC'd, she heals and does damage. She's just a really disruptive anti-meta hero at the moment, and it's really hard to kill her, and she is categorically the best forest hero in the game. Cruz is the final hero we find in tier 1, and this is interesting because he's definitely moved up in his performance recently. That's because heroes like Ada and Aspen are weak to CC, and when Cruces drop below 50% of his health, he CCs opposing heroes, and that can be really strong against Ada's and Aspen's. However, you've got to bear in mind that is stun, so if you're running your Ada or your Aspen with the stun immune artifact that came out at Christmas, it's not going to be too much of a problem for you, but still lots of heroes are weak to CC, and Cruz can often steal games just by using that final passive. He's also got fantastic support, healing, and debuff abilities, which just overall add up to a fantastic hero that a lot of Rainbow teams are favouring now in their Abyss slot. Dropping down to tier 1.5, we find several light and dark heroes. We have Amavor, who's a fantastic burst hero and was one of the first to have damage that scales with max HP. Moving along, we've got Belrain, and interestingly, you'll find she's dropped a little bit. That's because since the release of Aspen and Ada, she's been less optimal than we'd like her to be. She loses very easily to Aspens and can be wiped out because dark heroes do extra damage against light, and Ada just outshines Belrain in every way in PvP, so Belrain's losing a little bit of favour at the moment. She's dropped down to the tier alongside Faithblade and Michelle, who she's now more of an equal hero to, rather than being better. Faithblade and Michelle both provide fantastic stun. In Faithblade's case, he is carried up with a good burst, and he gains energy when heroes die, and Michelle just provides a fantastic control immune hero who can also heal your team and revive after she dies. Faithblade is also stun immune, so they're both good heroes to put in slots 5 and 6 to avoid Valentino strikes. Horus is the first shadow hero we find on the list, falling in at tier 1.5, and Horus has dominated as the best slot 1 hero that we've found, especially for Rainbow teams. Horus Rainbow teams are currently the easiest to make and do well with because Horus is just a fantastic hero. He provides incredible damage, and when he blocks, provides some of that valuable max HP scaling burst that is really tearing up the meta at the moment. Combine that with Ada's active and an Aspen, heroes will drop like flies. So Horus, Ada, Aspen Rainbow teams are performing really well. Valentino is the final hero we find in slot 1.5, and his stun and CC is great. As I mentioned before, CC is becoming a little more useful now than it used to be, with Valkyrie dropping down in performance, and heroes like Aspen and Ada really needing to get CC'd to be stopped. Well, Valentino provides really valuable stun. As well, he provides supporting damage with his overload ability, and is also just a generally good hero, right? He's not that bad at all. He's got some great tankiness. He's also stun immune, so it can be used to counter opposing Valentinos in slot 5 and 6. He's just a really solid hero to run, and that's why we find him up there in the top, tier 1.5. Dipping down to tier 2, as I've already stressed a lot, CC is definitely becoming more viable. So Dark Arthendal has come back from her depths of despair and jumped up a little bit to tier 2. And we find a similar thing with Jara, and you'll notice that both can be built with speed and energy. Now, it's interesting because Jara has been encouraged in the past to be ran with crit and damage-based artifacts, but since CC has become so important, and now thanks to the release of the stun immune artifact, any form of other CC that isn't stun has become really valuable. Jara and Dark Arthendal both provide this, and they're both generally fast. Dark Arthendal being the faster of the two, but Jara also being able to provide incredible damage. So a lot of people are favouring actually a speed energy Jara over the original crit builds that we've been seeing. Char, you'll notice she's dipped a little bit, and that's because she's a little squishy at times, and Ada does dominate heroes like her. She does provide useful burst, but she does need event exclusive artifacts, mainly Magic Stone Sword, to perform really well. Ormus has completely moved up from the depths of nothingness. He was one of the worst heroes, if not the worst elite hero you could possibly imagine. But now, thanks to his incredible buff to his healing, he can really outdo sustain, and it's just incredible. Like, Mim provides lots of decay damage, especially those double Mim good versus evil teams, but we've seen comps where Ormus can out-heal this decay damage and save your heroes from death, and if they don't die, Mim's sustain won't go off, and that means you can slowly whittle down opposing teams really well. If you haven't gone and seen Zeal's Ambitions video on this, it's really interesting. Go check out his channel. He's got a lot of content on Ormus, and it's really interesting to see how much Ormus's performance has rocketed thanks to his recent buff. Finally, in tier 2, we have King Barton. Some people would be surprised to see him down here, but really, he's currently the lesser Abyss hero thanks to Cruz, and he just isn't performing as well as we want him to. Okay, it's because stun isn't as reliable as it used to be, and lots of good stun heroes, like Cruz for example, aren't compatible in a lot of lineups alongside King Barton when it comes to aura. Sure, King Barton is a fantastic hero, I use one myself, but when you look at how Ada performs, her basic attack targets the highest HP hero, and often that's going to be King Barton or Valkyrie, and if your Valkyrie is lower on health, it's going to be that King Barton, and King Barton will get whittled away and targeted and ganged up on. Again, King Barton relies on really good artifacts to perform well, and in my opinion, the only viable King Barton really that we can see in the meta is the Magic Stone Sword King Barton. However, lots of King Bartons have saturated the meta, not running Magic Stone Sword, and that's kind of made his performance dip a little bit, and you shouldn't be as worried. You got to find out what your opponents are running with their King Barton, but a Magic Stone Sword King Barton is still a threat. It's just not as good as a slot 1 Horus, and that's why we find him in tier 2. Tier 2 isn't a bad place to be at all. Tier 2 heroes are still absolutely fantastic, but Horus is a better slot 1 hero, and therefore the tier list needs to reflect that, so we find Horus in tier 1.5 above King Barton, just to make you aware that Horus is the better pick generally for your Rainbow team. In tier 3, we find those heroes that you either have to really build your team around, or they're just not as good as other heroes on the list. For example, we have Dasmoje and Asmodal. Dasmoje, great hero, just not the best dark. We have loads of other dark heroes that are better to run. People are preferring to run doubles of Mim or Aspen on their good versus evil teams, so it's hard to justify running Dasmoje. Even in Rainbow teams, he's not getting a pick because Mim, Aspen, Amavor, they exist and they're good, solid, reliable heroes, so it's kind of hard to find Dasmoje on these teams, and unless he gets a buff, I don't think people are going to be using him on their teams very often, unless it's for a PvE team. Now, Asmodal as well, he's in a very similar situation. He's a slot 1 hero, which already limits his usefulness because only one hero can go in slot 1. So it's kind of hard to justify running Asmodal. He's still a great hero, which is why we find him in tier 3. He's not down in tier 4, tier 5, because he's really good. He just is outshined by those other light heroes, because light and dark heroes are rare, hard to invest in, and you really want the best if you're going to go forwards with them. Aiden is another hero we find, and Aiden's a really funny hero. Aiden Cheese teams are dominatingly strong, but really rare to find. The way Aiden works is when heroes die, Aiden gets a buff. So if you run a team that's designed to buff Aiden and die a lot, running Sleeplesses, Michelles who can die multiple times, or Destroyers who buff heroes when they die, you end up with a really strong Aiden, and when Aiden dies, he deals massive damage against your opponents, and you end up with these Aiden nuke teams that can shred people in Guild Wars, they can destroy people in Trial of the Champions, and that's why we find him comfortably in tier 3. He's an interesting pick, a little off meta, but still very fun to use and very cheap, very reliable, a good budget hero to chase. Corpse Demon as well, right? You need to run a specific team for Corpse Demon, and the reason why, I'll explain. Freeze, fantastic. Corpse Demon provides loads of CC, loads of freeze abilities, and he's immune to freeze himself. He's also really good at staying alive. His self-sustain and heal is brilliant. So why isn't he a good hero? Well, he doesn't deal any damage, really. It's really poor, his damage output. However, if you run him alongside heroes that can do a lot of damage, and you run Corpse Demon specifically as a CC hero, you end up with a rather well-built team, because Corpse Demon dishes out the CC, and then you run heroes that can deal a lot of damage to wipe up afterwards. So Corpse Demon needs to be ran with damage-dealing heroes to see really good performance. However, our big damage dealers are heroes like Horus, who share the same faction, or people like Aspen and Ada, and if you're running Aspen and Ada, you'd still rather run a Horus, because your damage output would just be insane. So Corpse Demon doesn't find himself any higher, because generally you'd rather run someone like Horus, and if you want to go down the CC route, a Speed Energy Jarer is probably better, because she deals reliable damage. Next up, we have Flamestrike, who needs to be on a burn team, and that can really limit her ability to be well. We've seen on stream some fantastic teams running double Valkyrie and Flamestrike, or Flamestrike Cthulhu teams, that really focus on using the best of Flamestrike's abilities. However, if you haven't got that burn synergy, Flamestrike is going to really underwhelm your performance. And honestly, I think she's a great hero, but you really need to build your team specifically around her, and that investment in burn-based heroes could limit you. Sigmund, great burn hero, needs to be in slot 1, fantastic damage output, just a little weak to CC, and that can kind of let him down. And if you are giving him an item like the Magic Stone Sword artifact, it's kind of hard to justify, because there are other heroes that can get better uses out of it, like Aspen, like Horus. So Sigmund finds himself in an awkward spot, because really he's outshined by Valentino, and if you want a slot 1 Fortress hero, it's probably going to be Shah. So Sigmund's not that great at the moment, but he does provide burn synergy, works well with Flamestrike, so you could run a triple Fortress lineup with Flamestrike and Sigmund together. I don't know, that could work. Give it a try. We have Scary as well, which you'll notice has bombed down into tier 3, and that's because Scary suffers from a massive weakness to CC, and rounds just aren't lasting long enough for Scary to rack up a lot of his buffs. Since the release of more and more max HP scaling burst damage, Scary has become less and less useful. Since the adjustments to the enabling changes as well, a lot of heroes had their base stats changed, and that really didn't favour Scary all too well. Scary is a good hero, but we find more and more often that you'll run a different hero in slot 1 that isn't Scary, and that's why Scary is slipping under the net into one of those heroes that just doesn't quite make it onto Rainbow teams or other Aura teams. Cthulhu as well finds himself in a similar position. If you're running Flamestrike and you want to run a Rainbow team, Cthulhu is definitely the hero to put in slot 1, but that's the only place we see him viable in the meta. Really limited, and really it's Flamestrike that makes him good, not Cthulhu. That's why we can't put him any higher. He's really underwhelming unless you've got that Flamestrike to back him up. Now we've got Demon Hunter, which you might be surprised to see that she's got as low as she is, but Demon Hunter isn't doing anything. Sadly, Silence isn't helping at all. Silence just gives Valkyries extra health. Heroes can still use their basic attack. If you're silencing an Ada, it's not going to stop Ada. She's just going to self-heal with her basic attack and shred away your health. It's just a sad state for Demon Hunter at the moment. Sure, if you give her a speed energy artifact, she's going to be, she's going to be good, because she has that CC immune, so she can stop potential CC builds, but what's she going to do? She just dies too quickly and isn't able to stay alive as your opponent's heroes dies, which is when she really does shine, because she gets a lot of buffs as opposing heroes die, but she can't stay around long enough to capitalize on that. Maybe we might see some niche reduced damage Demon Hunter builds that focus on trying to get her to stay alive into these later rounds, but really I don't think that's going to be too much of a meta choice at the moment, and for that reason we see her down in tier 3, because Forest heroes are just completely outranked by Valkyrie at the moment. Vesa as well, even since her buff, hasn't been performing too fantastically in PvP. Sure, she can deal reliable damage, but she's still slow and super weak to CC. Her silence doesn't really do much to stop opponents, because basic attacks are still quite prevalent, and really she's just, even if she can heal away her CC when she's dropped below 50% health and she soft resets herself, you'll end up with her getting CC'd again, and she's really underwhelming. I don't think I've been beaten by a single Vesa comp, and I can wipe them out with still 5 heroes left on the board. It's just really not doing much. Valkyrie is just the better pick, and because of that, Vesa is dwarfed down into tier 3. Moving down to tier 4, we find heroes that used to be really good but are now underwhelming. We've got Bloodblade, who provides great damage, good burst, good damage over time, but that's all he really does. He's weak to CC, doesn't really bring much to the table when it comes to the overarching meta. We want to see CC, we want to see that massive HP scaling damage, but sadly he doesn't have any of that, so he's not really seeing much play. If you want a big damage dealing shadow, the obvious pick is Horus. Kameth as well, his CC, super unreliable. It only hits the backline, and in the backline, that's where people put a lot of their control immune heroes. As well, he doesn't deal much damage at all. He needs Petrify synergy, which is really awkward to get your hands on. And yeah, like good heroes like Ada, Aspen, often they're put in slot 2. And that just completely dodges Kameth's attack. So if Kameth moved up in the meta, then people would just put their good heroes in slot 2 to avoid it, and then he'd be bad again. Like, Kameth is just not really that great at the moment. I know there are some Kameth fanboys out there, but really I wouldn't support him. Ice Blink, slot 1 hero, surprisingly. When he gets hit, he increases his own attack, decreases the opponent's. On paper, this is great, but really it's not. Like, there are much better slot 1 heroes, there are much better things that heroes are doing, and his CC, well, he's just too slow to be good. Right, it hits all opponents, great, massive percentage chance, and it's freeze, which gets around lots of stun immunities. However, it's just not good enough because he's too slow. Sorry, Ice Blink, you're only down in tier 4. And we also can find in tier 4 Heart Watcher, Rosa, and Emily, which I'll just cover straight up. They're support heroes that don't do anything else. They just support. Maybe a little debuff here, little debuff there, buffs, and that's all they really do. It's debuffs and buffs. That's all it is. No healing, no stun, no massive damage. They just support, and therefore you can't really justify them being efficient heroes because they don't bring more than just a little bit of support, whereas there are other heroes out there like Belrain, Cruz, even arguably Valentino that offers some extra damage or debuffing effects that really hurt your opponent. So for efficiency, you really can't justify running these teams in the endgame because it's just not that brilliant. We can also find Karim, Queen, and Berir, 3 Abyss heroes that are just dwarfed by the other ones in their faction, and are actually really good if you're in a meta where people are moving towards enabling, but haven't got a full team yet, because they can offer massive damage, have really good ways of surviving, and have really capitalizing effects as opposing heroes die. In Karim's case, can just do a lot of debuff and swell off with massive burst damage in Queen's case, or can, if they stay alive, will just self-buff and deal a lot of damage, which is Berir. But sadly, when you've got to the end game state where you're facing all E3 teams, these heroes start to dip off in efficiency, will either die too quickly to see themselves doing anything, or just lose to CC outright. So sadly, they only spot themselves in tier 4 for the end game E3 meta. Dipping down to tier 5 now, we've just got those heroes that didn't really do anything, right? We've got Dantalion, who at one point was really good on defensive teams, but now just doesn't do anything. We've got Gru, same thing goes. Once you've got a full E3 team, he's just super easy to kill. Like, since the release of max HP damage on more and more heroes, Gru and Dantalion just get eaten up, and they're not a threat in the slightest. And Walter and Margaret have really unreliable stun, and they're just... the poison that they provide isn't usually good enough. They die too quickly, they lose the CC, they're just pretty weak heroes, they're just slightly too slow to be efficient CC, and it's not that great. So yeah, don't run those heroes in tier 5, they're just pretty wank. So there it is, guys, that's the PvP tier list, and I hope you enjoyed my little discussion about it. Now, one thing I want to mention is I've just started using Patreon. If you don't already know, I'm going to be creating a website that provides loads of supporting information and guides for every single hero. So if you want to know more about the heroes I've been talking about today, on that website will be different guides and different ways you can build these heroes, what artifacts to use, what stones to use, what teams to put them on, etc. Now, the only way I can get this website off the ground is from your support. That's why I've set up Patreon. So I've already got a few people asking me, hey, how can I get involved? How can I support your content? Well, I've just let you know that I've set up Patreon, so if anyone wants to help support me, that's great. Now, if you want to support me in other ways, if spending money isn't for you, you can just like and subscribe to my channel, because all that helps me massively. So thank you guys for watching this video, and if you want to support me or get in touch, the links are down below. As always, guys, have a great week. Happy idling.